and welcome. Have you noticed lately that a lot more people are looking at their palms in supermarkets, bus queues and while watching television? Well, it may have something to do with the fact that Zodiac Company is halfway through its second series, and palms, pens and planets have taken on a new significance due to the rather amazing findings of our panel. Let's introduce you to the panel. Our astrologer, Julia Parker.
Hello. I've been given birth date, time and place of our subject, whether they're married or single, male or female.
And you can't cross a T or dot an I without Albert Hughes reading It and More.
Hello, I've been given the piece of writing with the age and sex of the writer.
And Laurie Reed, who reads our palms like the back of her own hand.
Hello, and I've been given palm prints. I've been told the age and the sex of the person and whether that person is right or left-handed.
Well, armed with that information, I wonder how our panel see our first guest. This is how she sees herself, for you at home and our studio audience.
My name is Rosie Swale. I'm most notorious for sailing around the world with my husband and two little children in our little home, Annalise, and for writing books. My first two books are Rosie Darling, about my earlier adventures, going to India and Russia, and having my baby delivered by Colin on board the boat. The other book was Children of Cape Horn, which was about our voyage around the world. We owe our entire sailing career to the West Country, because it was in Teignmouth that we first saw a catamaran, and a man with a faraway look in his eyes handed us the keys, and that was it. And we sailed away, and the sea sort of infected us, and it's a very hard disease to get rid of, our love of the sea, once you've got it. And we sailed back to Plymouth just 3 years after we first started sailing, after a 33,000-mile voyage. And I'm writing a third book, which is about the incredible adventures of getting our latest boat financed. When Rosie's Granary, which is the name of the boat, is finished, we're hoping to take part in the last leg of the Whitbread Round the World race, and then we're going to go off on a marathon expedition in her very long voyage. But I can't tell about that yet because it's secret.
Well, you know what they say, don't you? That we never see ourselves as others see us. Let's have a look at how our panel see our guest, Julia.
Our first subject was born in early October, so her sun sign is Libra. But what is going to colour her personality more than the position of the sun is the fact that the moon was rising in Aquarius and Mars and Pluto were setting in Leo and Venus at the top of the sky. Here is someone who is perhaps audacious, daring and unpredictable, who could be impulsive and who needs to express herself independently and in her own original way. She's also possibly ambitious and resolute. We're not totally certain of the birth time, but if the moon was about to rise, this could have a bearing on her mother. Was our subject born under difficult circumstances? Was the birth difficult or quick? Did she have a serious childhood illness, a blue baby perhaps, or was she adopted? There's an overall theme of glamour to the chart, and she could sing. Differently, she has business potential, but in partnership and not alone. She might be into women's lib, or even could make parachute jumps. She could travel extensively and dangerously. She's romantic, and she has a nice sexy Venus in Scorpio, but may have felt an element of shyness in her emotional relationships and had to fight just a touch of the green-eyed monster. With the Sun, Mercury and Neptune all together, she could have lots of enthusiasm for whatever subject she studies, and if she cares to make it astrology or music, great.
Her love life is of overriding importance, and it is in this area that she will never compromise because she loves beauty in all its forms. There are high and firm T-bars on the words to and time, but none on divergent and it. She can assert herself aggressively, but only through necessity, because she loves peace and harmony, as shown by the predominance of the curves. The sharp tops to the L's show a critical ability, which she would apply to questions of justice and injustice. The double curves, as seen in the arched ends and hollowed U's, mean adaptability. A balanced proportion between connected and disconnected letters in the word strengthen the adaptability, as does the vertical to left slant. There will be compromise in negotiations and possibly an interest in music and choreography. The formation of the T's in the words to and time suggest that she also adapts by absorbing and assimilating the situation. In this way, she takes the sting out of any biting situation. Possibly she experienced a severe emotional upset when she was very young, which would also cause her to retain a deep and moving memory of the lost object. The arched U's and the writing speed suggest that rather than have a public scene, she would wish the ground to open up. This is a person of stimulating charm and smiling conversation, who could shine in negotiations or in righting wrongs, or indeed in the beauty world, such as fashions, cosmetics, etc.
Here's a lady with a great sense of humour. She's funny, charming, ebullient and vivacious. All the fingertip formations are highly placed, so this gives her an intellectual and theoretical approach in life. The headlines are very different, straight on the left hand and bowed on the right. So this gives her a nice balance between rational and imaginative type of mentality. Another difference lies in the apices under the Saturn finger. On the right hand, it is directly under the finger, but on the left, it is slightly askew. So although she has a good sound judgment of what money is worth, it doesn't stop her necessarily from being a spendthrift. The general widespread of the fingers shows she is open, frank, creative and generous. The combination of fingertip patterns imply that she's at her best when working with other people. All the fingertips are whirled, but the thumbs are looped and composite. So at times she gets angry and frustrated with herself because part of her wants to be up and doing, but she's dragged back by doubts and uncertainties, and she ends up regretting lost opportunities. She has a composite whirl on the third finger left hand, and traditionally this means that she's the type of person who always seems to have lucky escapes. And that ends our analysis for our lady guest this evening.
Well, our panel find our mystery guest a fairly adaptable person. They think that she likes to face danger, and Laurie has just said she seems to have had some lucky escapes, and they're absolutely right, because knowing nothing about sailing, she took off with her husband to sail round the world, her husband and little daughter. She gave birth to a son on the way, and with her husband she was the first to sail a catamaran round Cape Horn. She is, of course, Rosie Swale. Incredible, did you say?
I thought it was absolutely marvellous because what you said was quite right, Joy. I am, I suppose, ambitious, but ambitious in partnership with my family. I never like to do anything separately. And you were also right because, you know, I am an orphan and I was born under difficult circumstances. I was adopted and brought up by the wife of the postman in Davos in Switzerland till I was 3. So you're perfectly right about that. I must say, I consider you've said only the nice things, and I feel, you know, I was getting all ready to run away from the things you might say.
That is fairly incredible, because both Julia and Albert picked up the difficult birth, the emotional, and I suppose that must have coloured Rosie's life ever since, has it?
Yes, I think so. And it's very interesting that you had a child while you were on your ship, is that right? Under difficult, you yourself had a child.
When I was a child, I was born, my mother unfortunately had tuberculosis and she died after I was born, and so I was brought up separate from her and adopted. And I didn't go to school till I was 13. But I think you're all geniuses, your mum.
This is the lost object, which I meant. Your mother, of course, was your love object.
Yes.
And this was lost, and this has left a very obviously tender memory within you.
That's why I
yes,
am ambitious in partnership,
yeah.
because I now value my family.
Of course you
greatly.
do. The love life is very important, as I
My
said.
2 children are Geminis, and they were both born on the 18th of June, 2 years after the other.
You know, I'm beginning to think that Julia and Albert are in collusion because both
No,
of you...
no, not at all, no.
No, Julia said sing, question mark, and Albert said possibly music and choreography. Rosie, are you at all musical?
Well, I love singing. I used to play the Irish harp. Not perhaps very well, but the harp sounds so nice it makes up for my singing. I love dancing as well.
What about the green-eyed monster, jealousy? Are you a jealous person?
Yes, I suppose I am a jealous person, because I value what I have, because I've not often had very much permanently. I'm very difficult to live with and very willful.
Well, you're very honest, aren't you?
Yes.
Yes.
I got here that Laurie said you may regret missed opportunities. Well, you certainly seem to have grabbed every opportunity that's come your way. What have you missed?
So far, I haven't regretted anything I've ever done in my life, except perhaps I'd like to have met Colin a bit sooner. I'd like to have gone to India and to Russia with him instead of by myself.
Do you find you get frustrated with yourself, though? This was the point I was trying to make.
Oh, I do. I often get completely maddened with myself because it's very, very hard. I think I'm very lazy. I find it a tremendous effort to write books and do things.
And while you're a great individualist, as obviously you must be to lead the life you do, nonetheless you would agree then that you would hate any scene in public. I mean, you would much rather go away and wash one's dirty linen, so to speak, than have it out.
It is a danger, that I think, with all Librans, that I don't like rows. I hate them.
Yeah, yes.
Perhaps because my grandmother was ill and she often, found it difficult to get on with her companion.
You love peace and harmony more than anything, but you will only you'll only fight through absolute necessity, wouldn't you?
I think you're right.
Yes.
I think you're very clever people. I know very little about your arts, but I think they're marvellous.
Rosie, you sound like a lovely lady who's very much in love with her husband. Let me give you our panel's view of yourself to keep and ask you if you'll stay with us for a moment while we go on into our middle piece, where we explore a little further into the world of the unknown or the uncertain. And in fact, we're looking again at reincarnation, because what did Henry Ford, Plato, Napoleon Bonaparte and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle have in common except their belief in reincarnation? Hypnotist Arnold Bloxham has taken many people back to former lives, and indeed his work has been the subject of a book recently published by our next guest, who is a journalist and a television producer, Jeffrey Iverson. Thank you for joining us, Jeffrey. I'd like to sit next to Rosie. Jeffrey, the subject of reincarnation is fascinating, but why did you get involved with Arnold in the first place?
I got involved basically because I put the idea up to the BBC that we should do a 50-minute television documentary on this quite celebrated hypnotist. And I began to make it with Magnus Magnusson as the front man. And in the course of the researches for it, where I expected at the outset, I knew a good deal about Hinduism and Buddhism. I'd read a great deal about reincarnation out of interest, apart from as a preparation for this film, which is one of the reasons I happened to choose it as a subject. But I had expected that the explanation for these regressions, with some of Bloxham's tapes, and there are 400 of them, some individuals appear to have 14 previous lives. One person with another 14 that they can recount in great detail. And I had expected that the rational explanation that they were embroidering some kind of a historical fantasy, that they'd previously read something and had consciously forgotten about it, and that they were having some kind of Walter Mitty existence. I came across a psychiatrist who said everybody has a B-movie running in their heads all the time. And that's right, well, I expected that to be the explanation. But through various researches and doing most of it myself over 2 years, it became so remarkable. We found a crypt where none was believed to exist. We found items of jewelry. We visited a 15th century medieval house that was described in enormous detail. We went to York, where places, streets, and personalities were all recounted from the 15th century accurately. And we met many historians who said, there are certain parts where we cannot say that this story is true, But what we can say is that it could be true, because this person is describing a gap in history.
Of course, Geoffrey, you picked out the most interesting of all of these tapes, but it does seem odd that most of the ones that you investigated, the subjects spoke in English.
That's right. You could have expected some of them, to speak in medieval French or something like that. There are people in the world. The foremost authority on this regression business is an American, Ian Stevenson, from the University of West Virginia. And he knows of an American who was hypnotized, regressed, and he spoke in a dialect of medieval Swedish. Bloxham has a subject who spoke to him in German, apparently having no previous knowledge of German. But Bloxham doesn't speak a word of German, so it ended there. But most of his people speak in English, and the Bloxham believes it's because if he'd had Latin or medieval French to ask questions in, he believes they'd have replied in it. I'm not convinced about that. I think it's entirely possible it's a visual memory, if we have a memory of a previous life, and that we see it as a series of pictures, and that it may be exactly if I said to you, what's your earliest childhood memory? And you may tell me something from the age of 3 or 4, but you don't do it with the vocabulary and the speech of that time.
Yes.
You might see the pictures, you might recall events, and I think it's something like that.
Geoffrey, very, very quickly, do you believe in reincarnation?
Well, the book is More Lives Than One, question mark. I don't believe much in believing. I'm a journalist by trade and practice, and I think it's for the person to read the book. There's something extraordinary happening, number of possible solutions, put them all forward. I think reincarnation is as likely an explanation of what happens when we die as anything else that I know of, but I'm basically agnostic about it.
Geoffrey, it is a fascinating book. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
joining us. Well, now we go on to our mystery guest number 2, who needs more than one life at one time, I think. I'm not going to say any more, because if I do, I'm sure I'll give his identity away. So let's have a look at our mystery guest, and again, have a look at how he sees himself.
My name is John Cleese. I think of myself as a West Countryman because I was born in Somerset, and when I was a boy, my father, who used to sell insurance in the West Country, used to drive me almost every day in the holidays around Somerset and Devon. And the programmes I suppose I'm best known for are Fawlty Towers and Monty Python. And Fawlty Towers, the idea for Fawlty Towers was actually born when I was in Torquay filming for Monty Python, because we were staying in a hotel and the owner there was so deliciously rude and offensive to his guests the whole time that I filed the idea away and eventually used it. I don't really know what sort of a person I am. I know that I'm introverted, not in the sense that I can't talk to people, but that I've certainly got a rather private set of values. I know that it's very nice to be successful, but I don't in fact think it's all important to me. I think I sometimes strike people as being rather more fierce and rather more dominant and rather more aggressive than I actually feel inside. I think people attribute more confidence to me than I probably really have. I think probably I have a tendency certainly to become very tense under pressure, and I don't like working under pressure. And I think probably the thing that I have most trouble with is actually losing my temper. I find this very difficult. I wish I could lose it a little more often. So far as the panel is concerned, I'll admit that I used to be very sceptical about these things, but I've discovered that the older I get, the more I tend to think that there's not just something in them, but perhaps a lot.
Our second subject's birthday is the 27th of October, so his sun sign is Scorpio. He has Virgo rising and the moon in Aries. There's no doubt about it. All this, plus lots of strong planetary aspects, makes this a very meaty chart indeed. I'm sure our subject has a high level of emotional and nervous energy that he utilises to the full. There's an air of nervous haste about him, which he will fight, putting forward a smouldering intensity to curb underlying impatience. With Sun square Pluto and Mercury opposition Uranus, he has a tendency to overestimate himself, to have too many irons in the fire. Like most with Virgo rising and Gemini at the top of the sky, he has a need to communicate. But Jupiter trines Pluto and Mars is in Aquarius, and this means a desire to lead the masses, organisational ability. and an urge to reform. He's inventive, quick at repartee, and he might be a bit tactless and argumentative. Overall tenor of the chart has an air of power about it. He'll want to be out in front and to grasp opportunities. These traits could have led him into politics or his fringes. He also has potential for research, psychology and maths. And if he's into sport, he's a real toughie. He's passionate and makes a good husband, putting lots into marriage and expecting a very great deal out of it. Thinks, does he read every bit of crime fiction ever written?
This writer is capable of acquiring expert knowledge in more than one area. Precisely because of these potentials, self-control and self-discipline are essential to him if he is to realise them. Otherwise, he would be a mere dabbler, a jack of all trades and master of none. But he does have the necessary self-discipline and self-control. The excellent spacing between words and lines, as well as the excellent margins, mean form sense and form judgment of a very high order. The firm T-bars, the straight but descending lines, the vertical to slight left slant, the smallness of the writing, these mean self-control and self-discipline. He has a good balance of intuition and logic as seen in the balance between connected letters and disconnected letters. The emphasised lower loops of F's, G's, J's and Y's mean that he's in touch with nature and the unconscious, yet the sharpness of the loops in the words first, for, finished show that he has strong critical powers which prevent him becoming a victim to mere hunches. Although the other upper loops of the H's, L's and F's are not emphasised, some of the I dots are high placed. This means that although he's down to earth, he is not without idealistic thoughts and feelings. He could be a breeder and or collector of pedigree cattle and or of horses. The secretary of a pedigree society with a librarian's knowledge concerning the cataloguing of literature relating to breeding histories.
This is a serious, sober-minded gentleman, someone who is careful and observant in life. The thinning of the third phalange of the Saturn finger denotes the perpetual student. He is forever wanting to learn and to know more. A branch line from the Apollo line towards the Mount of Saturn suggests that anything he undertakes to do would be first studied and carefully researched. This, together with a comparatively straight headline, reflects the analytical and pragmatic mind. The mentality is of a scientific bent, and any writing he may do would be of a factual kind. Looking more closely now at the headline, we notice a slight dipping between the ages of 33 and 36. This was possibly a critical time of self-searching for him, but the deviation would also bring with it a widening of his consciousness and outlook. There's an interesting loop on the Mount of Luna which implies sensitivity to the good earth, and perhaps he's the kind of person who likes pottering around in his garden and being out in the open air. In fact, I see him rather as the old-fashioned type of apothecarist or herbalist. A cross of St. Andrews at the base of the palm shows that he's in for a touch of heroics. He will, at some time in his life, save somebody's life. And that's it for our mystery guest this evening.
A man of many facets. He trained for the law, he was sidetracked into the Cambridge Footlights, joined the Frost Report, made a big name for himself in Monty Python, and now stars and writes in Fawlty Towers. Who else could it be but John Cleese?
You're right.
No, you can't talk without the rest of us hearing. What did you say then?
My God, I said serious and sober-minded. I must be mad.
No, but you're absolutely right, because what people don't know is that comics usually, I mean 99% of them are terrible, sober people, you know, who kind of get a lot of their humour out when they're actually doing their work. Or sometimes if they're in public and they feel they ought to be like that. But they're a very serious-minded crowd, morbid, most of them. Oh, true.
quite a few suicides amongst comics,
Yes,
aren't
well,
there? And clowns, circus
yeah.
clowns and so on.
I think it's something to do with the fact that they're actually, a lot of them, I don't think that I'd put myself in this category.
No, sure not, of course not. No.
Very unhappy people, and that the humour's a way of keeping it out
It is
there.
so,
yeah.
really.
So, but in fact, I don't think you're wrong at all. What's interesting is you pick up the kind of logical side, because I was a scientist, and I got A-levels in science, and then I did law, so there's a kind of...
And you've got the ability to catalogue as well, which, I mean, I brought that out in the different contexts,
Yeah.
but there's this ability to catalogue very detailed knowledge and to follow things through from, in the case of breeding, from generation to generation, isn't there?
The breeding thing, I must say, I didn't quite understand.
No.
Really, John?
Well, if you've been a scientist, you'd be interested in genetics, and it requires very detailed attention to
Yes.
the work, doesn't it, in following it through?
Yes.
Yes, he says, but you're still a bit doubtful about it.
May I tell you something that you couldn't see, but of course I have seen on the film that John made, in which he talks about himself. He's in his garden with some rabbits.
But I'm really, although I love going out to the country, which happens about twice a year for 2 weekends, in fact, the sort of the countryside of what you were saying, and the breeding of cattle and that kind of thing, I'm very interested in
earth and so
animal
on.
behaviour, but not really in the countryside, except as a marvellous place to escape to.
You're not a benign apothecary then, as Laurie suggested.
Certainly not benign.
Do you think you have nervous haste and smothering
Yes, I thought that was
intensity?
very good.
I rather like that,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, you also said at one point, I think it was Albert, Jack of all trades.
Yes, I know I said you could be one, unless
Well,
you
actually, I
have strong
It's
self-discipline.
nice of you to say that. Actually, I'm quite disciplined in my work,
Yes,
but
I'm sure
otherwise
you
I'm
are.
a total jack of all
Yes,
trades.
yes.
And yet you say of yourself, John, that you have difficulty in losing your temper and you're not as fierce as people would think. What's the real John Cleese?
Oh, I think that's right. I mean, my dad sold insurance in Weston-super-Mare, and they're not the fiercest people in the world, you know. And I think the whole English thing, the English middle-class thing, is very much something that I'm with, and sometimes I'd like to be a little bit more spontaneous and a little bit less reserved. That's what I was getting at.
Basil Fawlty seems the complete antithesis of what you are yourself. Is that a sort of an alter ego, something to release your pent-up emotions?
Yes. I don't think it's the opposite. It's the other side of the coin, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
And I think that through that character sometimes, because, you know, sometimes I'm at parties and people are talking to me, and I think, you know, this person is really boring, and I think if I could pick that egg mousse up now, well, I never have the courage to do it in real life. But I'm writing Basil Fawlty, so I say to Connie, right, he picks the egg mousse up, and she says great, because she'd like to be able to do that too. So we live out our joyous, spontaneous life through these characters.
Are you a sportsman?
Middling, yeah. Yes, I used to play cricket and football a lot at school, and now I just swim and play squash, but I love it.
And there's this thing that Laurie said about saving someone's life. Have you ever done?
Worst news I've heard from you?
And
No, I never saved
you will
anybody's
in your
life.
second half of your life.
Really?
You will.
Would I get paid?
No. Knowing you, you might.
Well, anyone who needs their life saved, even if they contact my agent, David will.
John, are you down to earth?
I think I am, but I don't think any of the people who know me think I am. Yes, I think I am down
But
to
you
earth.
are also, you're a man who, as I say, is not devoid of idealistic notions. I mean, I can actually see that in talking to you now, although you've got your feet on the ground.
I think that's true, but I'm fairly sceptical, and the political thing came up, which was very interesting. You were right, incidentally, about from sort of 33 to 36 was very much a time when that changed. I was very interested in politics, but the result of that change is basically my outlook's changed so much that I think 99% of the politicians have simply got it wrong.
John Cleese, on that happy note, may I present you with our panel's view of you. You can take it away and look at it at your leisure. And all that remains for us to say is good night from the panel, from John Cleese and from Rosie Swale, if she'll come in and join us. Good night.
I've got a chance now to ask you some more things.
We're dying to have a look at your book.